I'm recording now. Okay. Ready to go. Sorry. Kentucker is saying that part of the impetus for starting No Budge was to show films like mine, which is very flattering, and I thank you, Kentucker, for that. So yeah, I'm Mike. We're in my apartment in Chicago. My downstairs neighbors are playing rather loud house music, and I live near a train, so if I do need to speak up at any point, please let me know. Do have a tendency to mumble, no pun intended. Blah, okay. Kentucker asked how the movie all started and how many folks were involved. Um, it, you know, it started largely because I think I read like a tagline of a film that was something like a romantic comedy for people who hate romantic comedies, and for a trailer or something, and I don't remember what film it was, but uh, it involved that sort of like quirky awkwardness that is really popular with romantic comedies. This sort of like Ben Stiller quirkiness, which was fine. I just it struck me as funny that it was marketed that way. That for people who hate romantic comedies, should watch this sort of like very familiar way of responding to romance that didn't actually feel anything like shyness that I knew. And so I had a tagline first before anything, which was a romantic comedy for people who hate themselves, I think was the tagline, and then the movie started from there. So I wrote it for a while. I wrote, well, the movie is largely improvised, but I wrote a really specific structure for a while. I think I was 22 or something when I first started writing it, and had always had Gretchen in mind for the lead role, and Jason came a bit later. But in the beginning, it was largely just me, and then Gretchen and Jason came on a bit later, and then finally my grandmother, I asked her to be in it because I knew I didn't want it to be all young people. I knew I wanted some age and some wrinkles in there. And then we shot it for a month, one October, for with only the two actors and myself, and then two other crew members at the most. Sometimes it was just me. But yeah, largely that's how it started. This is very strange. I'm talking into the void. I don't know. You're gonna have to watch me drink water and things for the next hour. Um, the question from Kentucker again is he's complimenting the performances and asking if we rehearsed. And largely, no, we didn't. The actors didn't actually know the story. I wrote a story or a structure, mostly without dialogue, although some of the dialogue was written. Um, and then I didn't tell them. I just explained the characters, and we talked a long time about the characters, but we didn't. They didn't. They never rehearsed together. Certainly. Um, I'm gonna sorry confused by a question, which I'll get to in a minute. Ustreamer 009609. But the sorry the yeah we didn't they didn't rehearse together because they didn't know the story, and it was really important to me that that the actors rather only knew as much as their characters would know in any given moment. So that allowed a certain amount of playfulness in how some of the scenes were shot. But no, we talked separately for a long time. Jason and I talked about the character Dan, and Gretchen and I talked about the character Lillian quite a lot. And then the third role, which is the grandmother role, was a matter of sort of trying to find the moments. My grandmother was a very charming person, and she could react lovely, but we found that she couldn't sort of. She had trouble performing a script when lines were given. So working with her was largely about sort of like placing Gretchen, who was the only trained actor on the set, in a way for her to sort of push the other actors where they needed to go for any given scene. We can talk more about that later, maybe. I'll jump to this next question, which is from Ustreamer009609. He or she, or they, I'm sorry, I don't mean to assign specific gender roles to either of you or myself. Not to jump to the boring last question that people always ask, all hyphenated very nicely on the front end of this, but what are you working on now? Thanks for asking. It's been a while since Lillian and Dan came out. I went to school, and I've been working on sort of stranger, non-narrative essay type films, and sort of quasi documentaries, experimental documentaries, some call them. The project I've just finished up a series of 4 short pieces like this that have really, fortunately, I feel really fortunate that they've been screening around. I'm working now on another film with my grandmother with images of her. She died a couple of summers ago, sadly, but it's about her experience with Alzheimer's before she died, and also about sort of juxtaposing this sort of alternate or different, or whatever you want to call it, experience of time and memory with some footage of that sort of brings up the topic of a period of time in the country when time became standardized. So it talks about railroads and things like that, which were a big reason why we needed the time zone system and stuff like that. Blah, blah, blah. But I do hope, I've been itching to get back to narrative for a while, and it's something that is definitely on my radar. I've been working as a cinematographer for some other filmmakers, especially Frank Ross, who's a wonderful, wonderful filmmaker. And so I've been working in that vein, but yeah, I do hope to get back to narrative sometime soon. Cool. So next question, Ustreamer377474. Why did you decide to shoot on film? I grew up, if you want to use that phrase, I grew up shooting on film. I really enjoy the way that film looks. I think I knew finally was going to be slowly paced, or patient, and that it needed to be that. And I have this weird sense that, at least myself, that I find images that are longer takes, or are more sort of like landscape based, or that the movement of the grain in the images allows me to sort of enter them in a different way than video images often. That there's with still images, or sort of composed frames, that there's another kind of movement going on that sort of excites the eye. There's that. Um, yeah, I don't know. I really enjoy film, and I don't. It's hard to sort of articulate sometimes why certain projects feel like they need to be on film, and some projects don't. Uh, but this one certainly did. I was interested in the grain too. I was interested in sort of uh, making a strange romantic comedy almost, or non-comedy, a romance that was dirty and that wasn't traditionally lit, and it was going to get dark, and it was going to that you were going to see sort of the faults both of the people and sort of the image. So um, those were some of the reasons for shooting on film. And in thinking about new projects, I keep going back to the idea of shooting film, or I mean, I keep going back to I think about it and I plan to shoot on video, and then I hesitate, and I think it's just in my blood or something. Um, Next question. Kentucker asks, there's an incredible awkwardness and loneliness. Was this the main thing you wanted to capture? Were you a shy person growing up? Yeah, it feels so strange to talk about this film sometimes too, because it feels so far away. But yeah, I was interested in showing or trying to portray how it felt sometimes to be in those situations more than how it actually is. Because I think more often than not, like we can sort of we're up to the task of performing when in sort of romantic situations or situations where you're meeting people uh, for the first time or approaching people for the first time, and that it sort of carries this veneer of I don't know the word exactly, but it can approach that sort of like quirkiness, like it can be clever. And I didn't want the film to be clever at all. I actually wanted to sort of show what those situations felt like, and in doing that, you had to sort of, or I thought we had to exaggerate sort of the awkwardness um, of those situations. So I think a lot of people feel like it's fantastical in some ways how awkward these people can be, and there's a lot of times a jump to sort of pathologize them in a certain way, that there must be something wrong with these people. And I never thought about it as like, I mean, the aesthetic has a documentary sort of aesthetic, but I never thought of it as an attempt at some sort of like realist or verite sort of film. I thought of it like as a fable in a lot of ways. So the aesthetic was a way to sort of push that awkwardness and loneliness. Yeah, I mean, I think yeah, I was really interested in portraying that. It's something. It's like it's a heavy emotion that's hard to tackle a lot of times, especially in a medium that sort of rests on interaction. It's hard to portray that, and so I think I'm always interested in that. Actually, yeah, I think, and also the last part of that question, was I a shy person? I still feel really shy. I think there's sometimes like a disconnect in how you know again, there's like a sheen that you can sort of act through situations a lot, and I think feel awkward a lot of the time. Whether or not I seem that way, I feel like maybe I do right now. But I think, yeah, I think I was a shy person and still am in a lot of ways, or at least I feel that way. But there's another question from 009609. So I feel like this is like the worst radio DJ. I'm only looking at myself too, which is really not helping. But The question is, does the finished film closely resemble the one that you wrote, shot, and visioned, or did anything dramatic change in the edit? Uh, there are parts that are pretty much exactly as I envisioned them or wrote them. And there are parts that, yeah, are wildly different. I think the film veers quite a bit from where it started, and thankfully, some of the early edits had like some sort of strange side stories that I think were sort of pushing the strangeness of the two characters a bit too far, and they were fun visually, um, and part of it was that we never were able to like realize them exactly as I imagined them. But I think the film is stronger for not including them. But yeah, the edit changed. It changed quite a bit. I think it got more elliptical. I think uh, I was able to sort of do away with a lot of plot point sort of stuff that was in the original draft of the structure. And then, of course, I mean, the actors were improvising, and they were bringing they were bringing character traits and dialogue to the film that I never could have written, and I was surprised by, and it would have been stupid not to sort of recognize that and then sort of try and push that farther as they were improvising. So yeah, and kind of an interesting part that we had a different ending in mind, and we shot the film chronologically because the actors didn't know the story, so it was necessary to shoot it chronologically, which entailed a lot of trips back and forth from Boston, where we shot most of it, to New Jersey, where my grandmother lived. But yeah, it had a different ending in mind, and it sort of like was, well, like the next day or something. It was gonna leave the bedroom. Excuse me. It was gonna leave the bedroom where the movie ends, and it it came time to shoot it, and it just felt wrong. Like we kept hesitating, and I kept hesitating, and then finally, like near just the last days before Gretchen was gonna leave, it sort of dawned upon me to just end it there, to just leave it, uh, you know, unconcluded in certain ways. Ken Tucker asks another question. Music plays a big part in this film. Did you have songs or a score in mind in the writing process? Yeah, a lot of the score was, yeah, there's a lot of music. It's something that uh, felt kind of funny in a lot of ways. A year after finishing it and watching it again, is that yeah, there's a lot of music, and I hope it doesn't. I didn't want it to operate as sort of like a traditional score, where you were sort of getting cues about emotional cues and things like that about how to feel at a certain point. So, but I did have I had a Saltero in mind. Saltero is a band who is essentially a really good friend of mine, Tim Howard, who was part of the crew actually and plays the role really fantastically of the dancing guy in the Thai food restaurant early in the film. That's Tim, and he had this album, and I knew I wanted to use a lot of those songs, and I had specific ideas about where, like, the specific music cues I had very early, like where it came in, where the music comes in the block party scene was one really specific music cue that I had in mind, and then the rest sort of came about in the editing. A lot of the music is by a band or a person, I'm not really sure, called Melisse, who is British, and the score part of it actually comes from this one album of hers that uses like the DNA sequences of plants or something like that to create this sort of strange music, and I really enjoyed the music, and I thought it fit in a lot of ways, that it felt like it was propelling the movie forward, but it wasn't actually cueing you in any certain way. And then yeah, I saw Casey Dynell is the singer songwriter who has later in the film there's a music cue that Lillian listens to, and I saw a show of hers, and I thought that that specific song was something that she would listen to. It was probably a little like cool or underground or something. She probably wouldn't have heard of Casey Dynell, Lillian, that is, but I thought that it was something that she would listen to, especially in sort of the strange rocky moment of like preparing for her date. So that was how that came about. Um, Kentucker asks another question. There are several singing and dancing scenes which lighten up the film a great deal. How did you come to incorporate those? That's another really that the scene where Lillian and the grandmother character dance was something that I had really early. I just liked the idea. I mean, the film is largely wordless, and that was really important to me too. Is that it wasn't that there was dialogue, but that it wasn't resting on the dialogue to propel the story forward. That the visuals, because I mean it fit in a lot of ways with how the characters would interact. That they weren't talkative. That they sort of guarded themselves and wouldn't be so open with their thoughts and things like that. So I was interested in ways to tell the story wordlessly, and the dancing sequence was one way to do that. I like the idea of trying to cheer someone up that way. And the so that one was definitely planned, and that was funny to shoot. But the others, there's another sort of dance sequence earlier in the film where the two characters sort of dance separately but together, and I think that came largely out of improvisation. I think the Jason side of that scene was shot first, and 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 then we were in New Jersey later, and had some time, and we were just trying to like shoot some stuff in that space. Gretchen essentially like decorated the room the way that she felt Lillian would decorate the room, and we just wanted to spend some time in the room with her and shot some things that didn't work so well, and then we shot this dancing sequence, and it ended up cutting together really well with the stuff we had done with Jason. And I think it just, yeah, I mean, Kentucker mentioned that it lightened up the film, and I think largely that was the intent, is that, I mean, I wanted there to be joy in the film, just that the sort of scale of it was going to be quite a lot smaller than a traditional film, or than other films that are out. I really wanted it to be on a scale. Mike Leigh has this amazing quote about like shooting films on the scale of the human face, and I liked that idea that that you could create a world where where removing one's shirt in the middle of the night became this really like triumphant gesture, and I think it was all of these decisions were sort of a way to trains going by. Hope that isn't really awful. Anyway, yeah, I think these are ways to sort of lessen the scale and make make ways for people to connect that aren't through speech or overtly romantic gestures. There's a question about what new recent movie have you seen that has gotten me really excited and inspired to keep making movies. Good question. That's going to be hard to answer right now. I haven't been seeing a ton of movies, but I saw Uncle Boon Me, Who Can Recall His Past Lives, I think is the whole title, which is a little bit older now, but that's sort of how I'm operating right now, is a little behind the curve. I just found that really, really exciting. That whole first sequence with the bull is just totally beautiful. I think Frank, it's been really good to work on Frank's movies. to see him work and to be involved in that process, and it's got me working on a set again, which feels far away a lot of times. So yeah, if I think of any others, I'll chime back in with the other movie makers. I mean, but I'm also really inspired by going against what I'm saying. I'm just going to keep talking about it. I mean, I moved from Boston, where the film was shot, to Chicago to go to grad school, and filmmakers like Deborah Stratman, who's here. I think she's doing really exciting work that is out of the box and non-narrative, but in ways that can really pull emotion into like a more historical or essayistic analysis of a certain theme. So I'm really excited about incorporating those ways of telling stories. I just saw Jacqueline Goss's new film, The Observers, which is really, really great. Ben Rivers' new film, 2 Years at Sea, is really good and has like the most amazing ending shot ever. So yeah, so those are some other filmmakers. The next question is about filmmakers. Also, Ustreamer638670 says that I mentioned Mike Leigh and asked what other filmmakers have inspired the work. And yeah, Mike Leigh is a big one. Especially, there was a lot of research before shooting finally about sort of alternative ways of shooting films or achieve, not that wasn't the traditional sort of like Hitchcockian, that there is this complete vision that exists beforehand and the act of shooting is just a way to realize what is in the filmmaker's head. And I was interested in sort of giving up control a bit and being surprised while shooting, which I felt was really important. So Mike Leigh, so I read a lot about Mike Leigh's method, which was very inspiring, but wouldn't ultimately work for this project anyway, because I felt pretty sure that I didn't want to share the story, that I wanted it to be a surprise for the actors. I mean, I think Wong Kar-wai works that way, both improvisational, but in a way that will sort of like will sort of chase a theme that shows up during an improvisation. I'm really interested in the way that Ken Loach works. I think his films are really beautiful, and they do a really wonderful job of combining trained actors and non-actors, which is something I was really interested in, is like, playing the mad scientist, for lack of a better sort of analogy, but that you can get really wonderful performances by choosing very specifically what an actor knows and using the sort of trick of giving sort of conflicting direction to different actors to sort of create a space that will bring about some really surprising things in front of the camera. I mean, there's a really he had a film called Sweet 16 that has this young actor that I think has gone on to become like a sort of learned and practiced actor, but was at that time very new, and he would sort of tell everyone else in the scene what was going on. Sorry, my phone rang. Except that actor. So, and of course that actor was the central part of the scene. So there's a famous part where he goes into a bathroom and is supposed to like murder someone for initiation into this gang or something, and as I understand it, that the actor like was just given that direction and didn't know what was going to be like behind the door when he opened it. But it actually turns out to be sort of a trick, both in terms of the filming of it, that everyone else was sort of in on the joke, as it were, but it's a trick in the film as well, and it's this wonderful sort of like collapse. So the moment where he realizes that it's a trick is this like amazing. There's so much adrenaline in his face, and it's something that just seems like it's impossible to. I mean, a lot of my actor friends really hate when I talk like this because they feel like I'm uh, insulting their craft or something, and it's not that. I don't know. Perhaps someone knows how to direct an actor towards, physiological changes in their own body, and that, but I don't, and so I think it's a tool to sort of blur that line between character and like person, where like your body is going to start reacting in the ways that will lead to a certain performance. um, and the scene in the film where, on such sort of like a much lesser scale, but where Lillian is surprised when Dan comes to the block party, was shot in that way, that we told Gretchen that Jason had the day off, and that he wasn't going to be coming, so she was just sort of waiting for people, and I'm sure like it becomes like a dance in a lot of ways, that like, you know Gretchen knew what I wanted from her because of the sort of context. Um, so she was playing into that about, this sort of increasing uh, sadness or something, that, no one was coming to this thing that she did, and when Jason walked around the corner, she was genuinely surprised, and I didn't have to direct her towards, be surprised when he comes around, and that just felt a lot more honest. And I was just more interested in that. I was more interested, and still am in a lot of ways, more interested in phone again, sorry, in the ways that, trying to create moments, that happen, as opposed to directing someone towards something, because it feels like it can get very labored very quickly to do that. There's another question. Do I own a camera? How often do I keep them around? I do. I own a couple cameras. I own a video camera that we shot Frank's last movie on, and are going to shoot his next movie on. And I own a couple of 16 cameras. The 16 cameras I have, I don't know if I would shoot a feature on. They're not exactly very reliably sync cameras. But they're here. I mean, two of them are here next to me. Yeah, I don't know. Yes, I own a couple cameras. Don't know how much more to say about that. I don't know. Any more questions? Another one. Kentucker, did you expect it would be easier to get the film seen? Huh. I probably in the beginning, I thought, it. I mean, I don't know. I probably thought it would be easier, but I didn't know anything, so I thought we were doing something interesting, and I hoped that people would want to see it. It did take a long time. It did. I was surprised at the process. Was very surprising. Ultimately, that it did screen, where it did, or that that you, Kentucker, were interested in screening it, was very surprising, because for a time there I just had given up. Which goes into this next question, which is when did I finish the film, and when was the first screening? So we shot the film in 2004, in October of 2004. So it was 3 years essentially before it screened anywhere. I had sent it out to a lot of places. I sent it out before it was finished, which I think was not the best idea, especially as someone that no one knew anything about. But it got some interest. It seemed like I got some messages from some programmers that they were interested in it. They were checking in about premiere status and things like that. So I felt pretty good about it, and then that ended up not working out. So that was a real disappointment. And then it ended up taking 3 years to get screened in the festival where I actually met Ken Tucker in 2007 at the Harvard Film Archive, which was curated by Ray Carney. And screened in July or June of 2007 at the Harvard Film Archive, and then didn't screen again for another year. It screened again in June of 2008 at Cinevegas, and Mike Plant programmed it at Cinevegas, and then it found some legs after that and it screened around. So in the year after, in the year after it screened, and then it wasn't going to screen anywhere else, I had pretty much just given up on the idea that anyone would see it, which was hard. So it was, I guess, both surprising that, I was surprised that how difficult it is to get viewers sometimes, and also that I was surprised at how many people seemed to genuinely respond to the film once it was out there a bit. The next question is, am I currently writing or planning for my next narrative film? Yes, I am. I have been for a while, but I am planning another narrative. I think I have. I think it will be similar. A lot of it will be written, but not all of it. There will be improvisation within a structure. Yeah, I think I hope it will be shot sometime soon. I sort of had a plan to shoot it on video, and now I'm thinking about shooting Super 16 again. But I think I know who's going to be in it, and largely what it's about. So I'm hoping, yeah, I think in another year or so, I can at least be shooting it. We'll see. Ken Tucker asks, I live in Chicago. Yes, I live in Chicago. And I do have a day job. I work at the University of Chicago, handling students and equipment needs. I'm not teaching, but yeah, it's something I'm interested in and hope to sort of segue into eventually, to sort of supplement the filmmaking and all of the money pouring in from that, which is hard to handle. It's hard to keep track of all of it. I was meant to be funny. I think it sounded like sarcastic or something. Yeah, maybe a couple more questions. Ask him if you got them. Those were Ken Tucker's words. He asked about the feedback process. That's an interesting question. What is the feedback process like? I'm gonna sip some water again. What is the feedback process like, and how many people do I listen to? Probably few. I don't, at least with this, well, I mean, I didn't send it out to a lot of people when I was making it, largely because I didn't know a lot of people when I was making it. I think I've been fortunate to meet a lot of filmmakers like Ken Tucker and like Frank and like a lot of other people that are wonderful filmmakers and would give a lot of great feedback. At the time, I didn't know that, so I think I showed it to very few people, 2 to 3 people, and re-edited based on their input. But largely it was just about taking the time. I think largely it was just about watching it and watching it again and sort of trying to listen to the intuitions and watching it. Actually, what became really important, and maybe it's the same for all of the filmmakers watching, all of you watching, that even beyond like getting, written feedback or verbal feedback from other people, that watching it with people becomes really important. Because at least in my process, that certain things can sort of skate by if I'm just sitting with the computer and, Final Cut or whatever, and mistakes or just awkwardnesses or something that doesn't feel quite right will skate by because you have other things to think about. But when you watch it with a person, you get that sinking feeling that's got to change. That becomes really helpful as well. So yeah, there were a few people that I showed it to actually just get, all their thoughts. And then I think I watched it with people and like made myself stay in the room to just sort of like try and feel the air. Where did I grow up? What did I do when I was a kid? And when did I know I wanted to be a filmmaker? I grew up in New Jersey. When I was a kid, I have like very few memories of being a kid. Actually, it's kind of it worries me sometimes about how much of a sort of cloud it all feels like. It feels very sort of ineffable. But I think I came upon the idea of wanting to be a filmmaker in high school. I have a memory of like being at like a 16th or 17th birthday party and watching a movie like Clerks or something that was popular then, and thinking like I could do that, you know. And I went to school like wanting to make like action films, essentially, like wanting to make really traditional stuff, and maybe a lot of that was about learning the craft. But throughout college, I think I decided that I didn't want to make action films after all, and that I got really interested. But then got really interested in the sort of language of film and the possibilities of storytelling in that medium. So no, I'm happy I moved away from wanting to direct fight scenes. There's a lot of videos from high school that are just a lot of really awful fight scenes. Maybe everyone has those, but moved on to the sort of quiet, awkward love stories / awkward films from there. What is my favorite edited movie? What is my favorite edited movie is another question. That's a great question that I would take me some time to think about. Yeah, I would just sit here in silent if I had to give you an actual title right now. Ustreamer 009609, email me or something. We could talk about editing. But yeah, I'm not gonna be able to answer that right now. Sorry. Yeah, any last questions? I think I'm pretty good. I just want to say thanks so much to Kentucker. I'll answer these these couple questions. Someone just asked what my favorite John Woo movie is. My favorite John Woo movie. I did have a real softness for Face Off in high school. Ultimately, I think that's not his best. What is it called? Boiling Point? Hard Boiled? Maybe it was really good. The scene in the flower. That was smart. One other question before we finish. I mentioned grad school. How did this higher education influence your more contemporary work? You know, in a lot of ways, I'm not going to go there. Even when I was showing finally early on, I remember having a conversation with Mike Plant at Cinevegas in 2008 about how I felt self-conscious that the movie wasn't more than a love story or something like that. And it was stupid. I just felt really nervous about, you know, the importance of it or something, like what it was doing in the world. And I actually don't think that's a valid concern. I think if it touches people and if it's honest, that any story is sort of worth being told if it's told well. The grad school question, how did it influence my more contemporary work? I think I became really interested in sort of, I'm still really interested in people interacting. I think that's actually something that's really built into, like, you know, the fiber of my interest is sort of those quiet moments, or the sort of like micro ticks of faces and what that sort of says about thought and things like that. I'm really interested in that, how people often wordlessly interact. But I think I got really interested in sort of cultural and historical concerns. I got really interested in how, especially the new project, about how the past couple projects, about uh, how the sort of cultural stuff we live with, technology and transportation changing and the internet, about how that sort of affects the way, how ultimately that affects the way we interact on a interpersonal level, and how we sort of look at groups of people, um, from a sort of scare quoted normal perspective. And I think that was actually sort of latent in Finally, especially in the way that people seem to think that they were sick. And there are a lot of ways that like we sort of push that I was interested in sort of having a character that was uh, that had an issue, that had some sort of like emotional or uh, mental issue, but that it wasn't actually that wasn't what the film was about. That just was part of their character. That it happened to be so. Um, so yeah, I think hopefully I answered that. I don't know. Ustreamer 638670 with an X over the 3. You can email me about it. Kentucker says he really loves the film, and it has stuck with him throughout the years, and he's glad to have me on here. I'm really happy to be here, Kentucker. I really appreciate it. I'm really glad you're showing the film, and that it was so lovely to see Nick Dawson's article on Filmmaker and stuff today. It's really nice to know that people are watching it, and I'm glad. So I think I'm going to leave it up on the Vimeo page if anyone wants to watch or download or whatever. Kentucker says, please watch the film if you haven't, and tell somebody if you liked it. Yes, do. It will be available indefinitely, both on No Budge, I guess, and on my Vimeo site. Thank you to everyone who watched and asked questions. Yes, thank you so much. And thank you, Kentucker. And yeah, I can't wait to see your next film, Kentucker. And keep watching No Budge, everybody. Keep in touch. Cool. Thank you. Bye. I'm going to stop recording.